Good morning, everybody. It's another episode of Truck Talk, and it's not that late today. I'm doing it midnight my time, Pacific Standard, but I kind of wanted to keep it with the message of memorialism or memorization or memory or remembering things in history. I did a couple videos back about how if you don't study history, you're going to repeat it, and I kind of want to keep that line of thinking along with this Memorial Day holiday so that it all ties together. I'm wearing my Pura Vida hat, pure life or pure living, from Costa Rica, right? It's been a while since I've been to Costa Rica, but Costa Rica kind of opened me up to a great philosophy of just live your life and enjoy it. There's so much beauty around. And when I came back to the United States, I started to witness how the United States is so controlled all the time, and that the freedom that we enjoy is not so free anymore because a lot of people are infringing on it because they come here and they don't really understand the history of our country, and they don't follow it and they don't respect it. But anyway, I posted a couple news articles about how uh, in uh, in the South of the United States, they're removing Confederate war monuments and erasing them because they're offensive to some black people because they remind them of slavery. And they're offensive to the liberals, the leftists. And in India, they're doing the same thing where the Muslims are coming into India or maybe it was Indonesia. I can't remember if it was India or Indonesia, and they forced the removal of the Lady Liberty there, uh, or actually the Justice Lady, from their judicial building, the one that holds the scales, the balance of justice. The Muslims were offended by it, so they wanted to remove it. And really, that's no different than burning books. I mean, that's a form of censorship. Um, in my religion, Catholicism, we have a lot of statues, and there, a lot of the Protestant and evangelical Christians today consider that idolatry because in the Bible, which is actually a Catholic scripture, they don't realize the history of it, but in the Bible, it talks about not having graven images uh, of anything in heaven or on earth, and yet the Catholic Church has a lot of graven images. We have the image of Jesus Christ on the cross in the form of the crucifix. We have the images of Mama Mary and Saint Joseph, his parents, his holy family, and we have images of many of the saints who fashioned their lives in the very footsteps of Jesus Christ. And so when they died, we believe their spirits to be in alignment with Jesus Christ, so they become one with him in heaven. So that's why we tend to reverence those images, because we don't worship them. We reverence them as they are all connected to God and give them the respect that's due to them as holy images, but we do not worship them. And if you look at the history of the Catholic Church, a lot of the people back in the old times of the Catholic Church, well, if you look back in the times of government forms, you had monarchies. You had kings that ruled the world, and they owned all the property. It was feudalistic. It was a feudalism form of government pretty much everywhere. Even in the Muslim world, you had sultans or kings that ruled things. So the king owned everything in his or her kingdom. The queen also, all the royal family basically owned everything in the kingdom. So if you had property, it wasn't yours. You didn't own it. The king gave it to you because he owned you and he owned the property. And so basically, if you grew food on land, that was tribute to the king. You had to pay taxes, so you had to give whatever you grew to the king, and if he was generous, he'd let you keep some of it for your own sustenance. All right, so a lot of the people back in those days, when you had kingdoms, uh, they were poor and they were uneducated. They couldn't afford an education. There's no way. And it was back in the days before they had printing presses. So in early Christianity, most of Christianity was an oral tradition. Catholicism was an oral tradition. You basically, the elders and the church doctors kept all of the biblical scriptures here in their minds. It was all inscribed here. And the way they preached the gospel was through their mouth. That's why in scriptures it talks about preaching the gospel, not reading the gospel to other people. And so oftentimes the monks would spend their entire lives in monasteries writing down pages once the Bible was compiled in 325 AD in the Council of Nicaea. And so the monks would stay in their monasteries, and they would copy down through difficult scriptural handwriting each page, which was made usually from a sheep's hide. So typically, it would cost you an entire sheep's flock to pay for one Bible. It was like the price of a house today for one Bible, because each Bible was made by hand by a monk. So the other way that the Catholic Church was able to show people who couldn't read what was in scriptures was they would make statues and scenes, like the nativity scenes that we use today in Christmas time. Those were scenes that were used to depict the story of the birth of Christ, because people could not read the Bible, and if they could read it, they most likely didn't have enough money to be able to afford to buy one, because it would cost them so much. So often churches, the Catholic churches of the old days, had one copy of the Bible, and they would chain it to the ambo, or to the podium in the church, so that no one could steal it. And it was usually up in a raised position where the priests had it locked off, or only the priests had access to it. Because imagine a thief trying to get his hands on something that costs the price of a house. That would be prize game for them. And they didn't want to make it easy for the thieves to steal the scriptures, or for enemies of the church to steal the scriptures. And so they would chain it up on a raised up pulpit. In the Philippines, you can see a lot of those kinds of churches. Also, if you go to Peru, I went to Peru, talking about Pura Vida. I a couple years ago had a trip to South America and got to see some of the old churches down there. And you could see that they had these like towers with the ambo at the very top. It's like almost like a little terrace coming out of the tower, where the Bible was chained, and the priests could read to the congregation from there. The churches are magnificent. It's amazing how they used to build them. So, a lot of the study of history and a lot of the education that occurred for the masses in the old days was made through monuments and through things that were, statues, so that people can remember what's going on. And now you're seeing people remove those kinds of monuments. Now, albeit the statues in a church versus the statues in the South have a very different message. The statues in the South are often of Confederate soldiers who, are known for supporting slavery, because the South is known for supporting slavery. I find it funny that the Democrats and the leftist liberals are the ones who are against that, because they are actually the party that started a lot of that stuff. They started the Ku Klux Klan, or Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, who was actually the ones who were lynching and murdering black people and slaves to try to fight the Republican Party from freeing those slaves. But now those are the same people that want their Confederate soldiers or the Confederate generals' monuments removed, so that people don't remember slavery because it's offensive. Well, you should worry when someone does that, because that is very similar to burning books. Because like I said, back in the old days, like in the Catholic Church, the statues were the same way of telling the story as the books were. The only difference is the people couldn't read the books, but they could easily see the statues and figure out what the story was. Same thing is true of the Confederacy and the slavery that went on in this country. When you have monuments down in the South, they remind you of these generals that fought for the South. And when you do some study, you start to remember, the South fought for the slave trade. And the slave trade is a negative thing. So those monuments represent a negative thing. And you want that. You really want that there. You want that to remind you of the errors and mistakes of humanity, so that, as George Santayana said, if you do not study history, you are destined to repeat it. You want those monuments there to remind you that those bad things happened, so that you will not repeat them. And when a person comes in with the noble idea, leftists always come in with noble ideas that in the end are really hiding an unnoble truth. When they come in nobly saying, I'm going to remove this statue so it doesn't offend you, the unnoble truth is that they're going to remove the statue so that you forget that slavery ever existed. and that statue doesn't remind you that it existed. So that eventually, someday, enough generations go by, you won't know what slavery is, and they'll be able to enslave the future generations, maybe even you, if you don't know it. And that's the danger we face with millennials today. There are some millennials on TV that are very educated, and on Facebook and things like that, and on YouTube, and they make very good arguments. There are other millennials that have no idea what's going on because they've been born into a world that happened way before, and we're right now in an ideological struggle between the left and the Western world. The leftists are like communists, basically, the socialist left that always tries to steal control of your mind so that you don't freely think, and they can enslave you and dominate you. And this is what we're seeing. This is why, if you look in the Middle East and in those countries, the Muslims are tearing down monuments because they want to control your mind. Because Islam is admittedly about submission. If you look up a lot of their Muslim leaders over there, they will admit that Islam stands for submission, and that there really is no such thing as a moderate Muslim. Now, being in America, I know that to be false, because there are Americanized Muslims, and those Americanized Muslims do not follow the orthodoxy Muslim faith, Islam, because the orthodoxy Muslims are the crazy ones that are going and beheading people who don't believe in Islam. But they believe in submission over in the Middle East. And we're starting to see it also in Southeast Asia, where Islam spread through Indonesia and in Mindanao, Philippines. Right now we're seeing in the Philippines, there's a huge battle going on between the Muslims in Mindanao and the leadership, some might say communist leadership, because I believe that President Duterte is communist, but at the same time, I do like that he's cleaning up the Philippines. Philippines needs a little discipline right now, and he's giving it to them. But right now, there's a huge battle between Islam and the Philippine government. And a lot of the Muslims up in the northern regions are even supporting the Muslims in the south. And they're kind of, even though they're not violent like the ones in the south, they are almost like our liberals here, where they're like, "Oh no, Islam is not the problem. It's a peaceful religion. The government's going in and cracking down on them." Well, government doesn't crack down on religions that don't go kill people, like, Christianity, unless they're becoming an oppressive government. They don't go crack down on those religions. They crack down on the religions that are breaking the law, and basically Islam is a chaotic faith where they're not following the laws of the land. We even see that here in the United States. They're constantly pushing for Sharia law. Sharia law is the law they follow, not the law we follow. And so they're going to constantly disrespect the Constitution. They're going to disrespect things because they're about submission to Allah's law, or their God's law. And you're dead if you don't follow it. That's the punishment of not following their law. They cut things off. Sometimes it's your head, and if they sever your head, you're dead. So Islam is about submission. Leftism or socialist communism is about domination. So domination and submission go together. The leftists of this country and in other countries want domination, but they don't want to do the dirty work. They tend to be the lazy ones. Leftists like to steal money. That's what socialism is about. You made money, but you didn't earn it. You didn't make that. You heard Obama. You didn't build that. You didn't build that business. Well, I mean, if you didn't build it, who built it, So he's trying to say that, the government helped you to build it, and so you should pay the government everything, and then the government should pay it out to all the people. It's a redistribution of wealth. They're just trying to steal from you. And so Democrats and Islam, communists and Islam go together very well, except when communism tries to take over Islam. Then Islam fights it like hell. But right now, they're both in alignment because one wants domination, the other one wants domination, right? So it works hand in hand. But one party, Islam, is the only one that's willing to carry it out in a brutal manner. And that's what benefits the communists as well, because the communists are too lazy to do it themselves. They'd rather have henchmen do it for them. So basically, they're trying to be authoritarian. They're trying to be kings. So they're trying to rule over the slave Islamists. And the Muslims should realize that they're being enslaved, which is pretty sad because the history of your religion is slavery. If you look in the Bible, it even tells a story. In Genesis chapter 16, we hear of how Abraham couldn't have a child. Well, at the time it was Abram. Abram couldn't have a child with his wife Sarai. And so he ended up sleeping with his servant, his slave woman, Hagar. And then she gives birth to Ishmael. Ishmael is his illegitimate son. And the illegitimate son is born of a slave. So he's a slave. So Islam is slavery. They want you to submit because it's slavery. And guess what? They're slaves to the leftist communists who are bringing things in. And so all those ideologies are trying to wipe out history. They're erasing all those monuments. And we're seeing it at every level of society. We see it in the media now. The leftists have gotten into media. They are erasing the history and of the journalists who reported honestly. And now they're reporting basically propaganda. We see it in our church. My church, Catholic Church, is a mess right now because we've got communists in it. Our history in the Catholic Church has been against communism because communism only looks at materialistic stuff. They don't believe in spirituality. Communism is basically the ideology of the devil. They only want stuff, lust for stuff, and they don't believe in your spirit. So they try to erase everything that has to do with spirituality and being loving and free. Instead, it's a hateful, constantly jealous seeking, greedy seeking ideology, and it seeks to destroy anything that's against it. It's domination over the world. And so anywhere communism gets in, it destroys the old in order to make new. And that's why you hear their motto, destroy and rebuild. You'll always see the triangle of fists holding each other, right? And then you have the one fist raised as a very obvious symbol of communism, where it's destroy and rebuild. The educational system has them there. They're erasing a lot of the history in the textbooks and retelling it falsely. So you got fake news, fake education, fake entertainment. Entertainment. I got a great example of that. Back when I was a little kid, you go to Disneyland and you get on the Pirates of the Caribbean, and there's a scene where there's this building on fire, or the city on fire, because the pirates have been raiding. And this building has like 3 windows, and in each window you see like pirates chasing women. And then the last one is the woman is chasing the pirate, where she's going to beat him away because he's trying to capture her and rape her. Well, Disney, a couple of years back, I think it's been 10 years now, felt that was too offensive for women because of the feminist movement. So the communists crept into Disneyland and affected their thinking. So now they erase history, the reality of what pirates did, because they don't want to offend you. And so they're censoring history now. And now when you go into Pirates of the Caribbean, it's even further been updated now because of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So you have Johnny Depp in there. But now when you go into Pirates of the Caribbean, when you see that scene of that building with the 3 windows and the pirates chasing, it's no longer pirates chasing women. You got a pirate chasing a chicken. You got I think there's a couple women chasing the pirate with their kneading rollers for making dough. But it's politically correct now. So political correctness is basically stolen and erased history. It's no different than burning books. Absolutely no different than Hitler going through and burning books. When you go look in history, the Nazis burned a lot of books. When you look in the Dark Ages, where the Huns raced through the Roman Empire and led to its destruction, what did they do? They burned the books. They burned the prior education and the prior knowledge so that it destroys your culture. And then they can come in, they destroy, then they come in and they rebuild it the way they want to, which is totally submissive culture to their desires and their agenda. So we got to really be careful what you support. You've got to be more educated about the history of those things. So now I'm going to get on to my next topic, which relates, because they've erased a lot of the history of slavery and our monetary system. They're starting to rewrite the history of why our economy is going to be collapsing soon and our currency is going to be collapsing soon. They're trying to make it seem like Donald Trump is going to be the reason because he's led the stock market to a bubble, and when it collapses, they're going to blame him for it because he takes credit for the Trump rally, they're labeling it. I mean, if I were he, I would take credit too when it's good because it's possible it could continue to be good until he's reelected. And all he wants to do is get to that second term as a politician. That's the only desire that a politician has, their reelection. And so that's nothing against Donald Trump. He has to be a politician now if he wants to get things changed to make America great again. And I absolutely support him. Everything he's doing is flawless. He's doing what he can given the lack of support and the obstruction he's receiving from the communist leftist Democrats, who are now becoming embarrassed finding out that the Russians were not involved in their hacking, that there was voter fraud, as Trump said, and that they ended up murdering this guy. Well, we have to prove that first, but I firmly believe they murdered him. If you look at all the coincidences, it's too coincidental. The Democrats have too much power throughout all levels of society, and it's to the point where they're intimidating people and stopping things. That should be evidence enough already to see how they're doing things. There are too many deaths related to Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, and it's always around people who are trying to report them or to demonstrate their evils. Those people miraculously end up dead very close to the time that they're supposed to testify against them, or very close to the time that they discover something sinister about the Democrats. So the Democrats are really in a precarious situation here. They really have to go for broke now. So they're really going to try to take domination over this world. So anyway, the history of banking is now being erased also. And so we're starting to see these cryptocurrencies come into the forefront where a lot of the wealthy people know what's going on in the world. They know history, they're educated, they made their money, and they made a lot of money and they want to protect it. They don't want it in a system of banking that is controlled communist style, which is a command economy where the banks control the amount of money that's printed. They also control when little institutional banks go bankrupt, the central bank steals taxpayer dollars to bail out those little banks. They don't want their money stolen like that. So they're starting to hide their money in these cryptocurrencies where it can't be discovered because it's decentralized. It used to be gold and silver that you could hide it in, but history's been changed now because of derivatives. And if you study the history of derivatives, you'll understand how gold and silver are no longer safe havens unless you're going to invest in them for the long term. Because if you invest for the long term, you have to be willing to wait and wait until that day that there is no more gold and silver when people ask for it. And then the banks, the investment houses, the governments that are suppressing the price of gold and silver will be discovered for their sinister collusion to keep the price suppressed. And they'll have to unwind their positions because people will start buying whatever gold and silver there is, and that buying pressure will force them to reverse their short derivatives. And you'll see a major short squeeze in the gold and silver markets, more so in silver, I believe. I believe silver is a super spring-loaded asset ready to pop. So, but the cryptocurrencies are now the new safe haven asset. They have the same philosophy as the banking system and the monetary system, but it is decentralized. You don't have banks controlling it. You don't have banks creating it. It's all of us who are controlling it. All of us who are creating the money, and all of us who are managing and processing the transactions. And I tried to explain that to my mom, and she got a little felt intimidated because she felt it was too complex. But it's not. It's very simple. So it tells me right away that if my mom doesn't understand it, there are going to be a lot of seniors that are going to be wiped out because my mom's a senior citizen, and I know a lot of people that think like that. They're going to be wiped out. Their entire fortunes. They're retired. They made these fortunes. They're in dollar bills, and when the dollar becomes worthless, gone. Gone in 60 seconds. Fast and furiously taken from them. And it's happened all throughout history. I had friends in Mexico their grandparents were multimillionaires in Mexico, and then there was the peso crisis. And their grandparents woke up the next day when the peso was devalued significantly, and they went from being multimillionaires to paupers. They were poor overnight. So people don't realize that's happened all throughout history, where governments have manipulated and central banks have come in and controlled the money supply, printed or multiplied the money supply so greatly that it's made their currency worthless over time. Now just imagine now, it's the first time in history that we've had credit at this level. There's so much debt out there. People have borrowed so much money, they can't even afford to pay it back because there's unemployment, and also the value of the dollar is worthless. So the price of goods has gone up because the value of the dollar is worthless. And if you extend that credit there, it allows people to buy things using money they didn't earn because they're borrowing it from somebody else. And so they're forcing up prices even further by effectively printing more money. So we're going to see a huge credit collapse. And what things are purchased with credit? Real estate, cars, education, pretty much anything today is purchased on credit. So when all that credit collapses, you're going to see a magnificent collapse in the dollar, magnificent collapse of our economy. So the cryptocurrencies are skyrocketing because a lot of the wealthy people are seeing that, and a lot of the tech savvy people are seeing that, and a lot of finance people are seeing that. I'm seeing that as well. I believe that that's going to be the next level, the next system that we fall on when the other system collapses. And so you're seeing a lot of cryptocurrencies going to the moon. Some of them are pulling back now, and I believe it was a little bit of an exuberant bubble for the most part because a lot of people are scared about what's happening, and so they jumped into cryptocurrencies right away without understanding it. And now you've got some other people seeing that price of their Bitcoin or whatever going up so high. They've held it for a number of years. They want to cash out and, lock in that profit. So they're selling a lot of their cryptocurrency. So you see the prices go up like this, and then they crash down again for a little bit. You have a bubble for a while where it drives it up, 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 because all these excited people are getting in. And then the people who were in it a long time ago sell out, and you get that crash down. And then when it settles, I believe we're going to get another ground floor for the cryptocurrencies to rise again. Now, I've posted a number of interviews with Amanda Johnson and Cliff High and the Dollar Vigilante and things like that, where they talk about the cryptocurrencies, and they explain it in a lot better way than I have time to do it. But I believe that's what the next system is going to be. And if you study the history of money, you'll understand why. I've studied the history of money. Basically, money is currency, if it has value, if you believe it has value. And technically money is that way also. Different types of money in the past that have been used are stones. Stones as money, that makes no sense, but they've used them. Sticks, they had tally sticks in Great Britain back in the old days. They were just measuring sticks, and those were your money. That's why we get the terms, keeping a tally of how much is in your account, things like that. People have used pearls, they've used shells, we've used gold and silver, and now we're on fiat currencies, which are basically pieces of paper that are receipts. They used to be receipts for, I've borrowed this amount of gold from you, and here's a receipt. I owe you. It's basically an IOU that I owe you back this gold or silver. Now, those paper receipts are for debt. And so the thing backing our currency is debt. So they're going to have to keep pumping our system full of debt, and we're pretty much at saturation. A couple of weeks ago, I heard Brian Moynihan of Bank of America is looking at lowering the down payment requirement in order to get a mortgage from 20% to 10%. So there's still a ways we can go. There's still a lot more debt they can produce, and there's still a lot more fools who don't know their history because they're either too young or they're old and they never bothered to study history. Even though we had a major crash in 2008, they're going to repeat it again. It's going to be much worse given the derivatives that amp up the situation. So, what I'm saying to you today is don't allow anyone to erase history. Don't allow anyone to burn books. Don't allow anyone to remove statues. If you're the type of person who's offended by things, that's a personal issue. You need to deal with that in yourself. You need to start figuring out why you're such a pussy. I hate to say it, you're a pussy. You're a flower. You're a snowflake. You're so fragile that you can't take a bad thing said about you without emotionally crumbling. You got mental issues. You really got to learn to develop what's known as a thick skin so that nothing can penetrate and hurt you. You know, if you're really confident in yourself, then it shouldn't matter what anyone says about you that's wrong. You should know that's not true. I've had a lot of people throughout my life tell me things that are absolutely false about me. And it used to make me furious. It used to make me upset. It saddens me still to this day when people do that, and I'm the type that I'm not afraid to cry. I know I'm a man and I can cry about it because to me, I don't want to bottle it up. I'll tear about it. Doesn't make me a pussy. I'll cry about it. I'll still hurt you if you want to fight. I can put up dukes too, so don't worry about that. I'm still a man. But what I'm saying to you is know who you are. Be confident in who you are. And don't let people tear you down so easily. Because if you fall prey to these people who make it sound so good that they don't want to offend you, so they're going to remove all these bits of history so you don't get offended, you're actually making it easier for them to offend you worse. Where it's not just going to be your emotions they hurt. It may cause you physical, mental, bodily injury to you at some point if they become oppressive. Because they've erased all the history that's shown you that's happened in the past where people have been abusive. Don't allow it. Stand up for what's right. This is why I am absolutely against Islam in the Middle East and what these radicalized Islam groups are doing. They're destroying 5,000-year-old Buddhist statues. They are destroying 2,000-year-old churches. I'm not Buddhist, but that's part of human heritage. It's history. I'm like Indiana Jones, where it belongs in a museum. I may not believe in it, but it belongs in a museum because that's part of our history. And when you cut off those roots, you don't even understand who you are. And maybe that's the problem with a lot of the liberals today and why they're so sensitive. They don't really know who they are anymore. And so if you attack them, it really cuts them to the bone because they don't know who they are, and it affects them. If you know your roots and you're firmly grounded in your roots, those kinds of things shouldn't affect you anymore. So become stronger, become more hard, in who you are and firm in your beliefs and strong so that you can stand against the attacks of those kinds of people. In the Bible, it talks about putting on the armor of God, of righteousness, doing things properly, being courageous and bold. See, when you do bad things, inside you know it's wrong, your conscience affects you, so you're not going to be able to stand firm if someone attacks you. So you need to do things right so that if someone attacks you, you'll be able to withstand the arrows of the devil, okay, the attacks of the evil people, and you'll be able to recognize them when they're coming at you. So put on the armor of God, put on the wisdom of history, and protect us, protect yourself, protect everyone, protect our freedoms. That's the most important thing, to have freedom. Because without freedom, you don't have anything. You can't do anything, and you'll be stuck in a box from people that are able to control the masses. And it's always blown me away that they could do that. The masses, they could have millions of people, and they're like 5 people in the government. And the 5 people will control the millions of people. If the millions of people would just wake up, they could easily crush those 5 people who are abusing them. But they allow it. They choose it because they don't study history and they don't study the effects of what's going on to them. So, like I said, it's getting a little bit long, and hopefully you stayed with it. If you stayed with it, great. I'm going to post this on Facebook. I'm going to post it on Steemit and on YouTube. So if you are on any of those platforms, please like, share, subscribe, upvote, and basically, hopefully you'll learn something from it. On Steemit, I tend to do different posts from the other platforms. I also put supporting videos so that you can kind of see a little bit clearer what I'm trying to say, because sometimes I ramble and I tend to deviate from the main point in order to illustrate the main point. I'll go talk about something over here or something over here, and I tend to lose people because I go all over the place. But hopefully you're able to follow me there, and hopefully you're able to learn something, and hopefully you take some form of motivation from this. I hope. And I absolutely appreciate if you spent all this time listening through my entire broadcast. So again, thank you, and please support what I do so that we can continue to educate the population, because Thomas Jefferson said the best way to secure the blessings of liberty is to educate the population. Okay? I hope y'all have a good week. I might post some new ideas during the week, might not. I might wait until next week to continue this. But I hope you have a good and prosperous week. May God bless you, and good night.